All right, we have more breaking news. We just got word of an appeals court decision regarding Donald Trump that has huge precedent-setting implications for both Trump and the presidency overall. The court ruled that Trump does not have presidential immunity from lawsuits concerning January 6th.
A federal appeals court just ruled that several civil lawsuits against former President Donald Trump will be able to proceed. Now, we're going to talk about the broader implications of that ruling in a second. But first, let's dive into these cases against Trump. Of course, you've heard us talk, at length about the criminal cases against him, but these are civil cases. So some details from Forbes. The cases at issue in Friday's ruling include a litigation brought by Representative Eric Swalwell, a separate lawsuit brought by more than 10 House Democrats, and a third suit brought by 2 Capitol Police officers. The lawsuits seek to hold Trump and his allies liable for the trauma the events of January 6th brought the members of Congress and officers who were present at the Capitol building at the time of the attack, as well as for how it interfered with lawmakers' efforts to certify the presidential election results. Trump helped incite the January 6th attack based on his efforts to overturn the presidential election, the plaintiffs allege, particularly through his statements made at the rally that preceded the riot, such as telling his supporters to, quote, fight like hell, and saying they could go by very different rules to challenge the vote count. Very subtle, as always, by the former president there. Now, Trump asked a federal district court to throw away those cases because, and his argument was he was acting within the responsibilities of the presidency on that day. And there is a former Supreme Court precedent that presidents can be held legally liable only for personal actions that fall beyond, their language was, the outer perimeter of their responsibilities, outside the scope of their duties as the president of the United States. But early last year, the cases were allowed to move forward. So of course, Donald Trump, appealed and asked the DC Circuit Court to overturn the decision, which is how we got the ruling that was handed down today. So what was the 3-judge panel's reasoning behind their ruling? From CBS, the panel said that when a first-term president chooses to run for a second term, his campaign for re-election is not an official presidential act. Trump's campaign activities, like trying to overturn the election results, which plaintiffs argue incited the January 6th riot, were undertaken in an unofficial private capacity as office seeker, not an official capacity as office holder, the court ruled, adding that actions taken in an unofficial capacity cannot qualify for official act immunity. So in more simple terms, Trump was acting as a candidate in the lead up to and during his infamous January 6th rally. Now, this is an extremely important decision because if you consider the ramifications of were this 3-judge panel to side with Donald Trump and accept his argument, they would essentially be saying that any action the president takes while in office is protected under the doctrine of presidential immunity, no matter how far outside the scope of the duties of the president that action is. But instead, what we got was a ruling that means that just because you're the president, not everything you say or do in your term counts as an official presidential act. And I don't think it would be good for this country if we included attempting to overturn the results of a democratic election as an official presidential act. But of course, and as I alluded to, this decision goes way beyond just Donald Trump. And here's CNN explaining some of the legal ramifications at play here.
I want to read some of the things that the court wrote. They wrote that the president does not spend every minute of every day exercising official responsibilities. And when he acts outside the functions of his office, he does not continue to enjoy immunity. So they're drawing a line saying that there are things that you can do while you're president that can be held accountable in court. That is a major decision, a major evolution of what the law is. The other thing that this 3-judge panel panel in the DC Circuit Court of Appeals is writing is that they are saying that there are campaign actions and there are presidency actions. And what the president does while he is campaigning for re-election, including that rally on January 6th, that can be considered a campaign action, and that is something that you can move forward with lawsuits against. There are things that a president does as president that you can't sue over, that he does enjoy immunity over, but not in this situation.
So essentially, this means that presidents are no longer immune to civil lawsuits for anything and everything they say while president, which is, as I said earlier, a seismic ruling. Of course, we'll have to see if it sticks, because Trump can appeal this decision to the full DC Circuit, or he could appeal it to the Supreme Court. And Jake, maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but I strongly feel that if this is appealed to the Supreme Court and they take up the issue, that they would follow the ruling of this 3-judge panel. Because, and of course, this is not a Supreme Court that's unwilling to undo precedent. Of course, we saw that multiple times now from the Supreme Court. But this is just such it would be such a massive step for them to say that the president is immune to any sort of liability, no matter how far outside the scope of the actual duties of the president.
Yes, I think you are being overly optimistic. So there's a couple of different issues here. One is the ruling right? 2 is, will the ruling stick? And 3, what will be the consequence of the ruling if it sticks? So number 1, is it right? I don't know, Ray. I think it's a tough line to draw between he said those things as president. No, he said them as a presidential candidate who is campaigning. Man, that is a very blurred line. And so I get the reasoning behind it, but I think it's pretty tough to enforce. So if I think it's a tough case, I think the Supreme Court's going to swat it away pretty easily. So now, if it was Hillary Clinton who had done it, or Joe Biden or Barack Obama, then the Supreme Court might have a different point of view. And let's keep it real, how intensely political the Supreme Court is. So, but I would be pretty surprised if this massively right-wing court held Trump accountable in this way. Now, but if they do, if Rayyvana is right, then Trump is in a world of trouble. That means they'll bankrupt him into, they'll sue him into non-existence financially. They'll sue him into bankruptcy. And the model for this is Alex Jones. So, the families went after Alex Jones, and he had said awful things that led to potential violence and on. And then he was just a mess in court, couldn't even defend himself. And massive rulings against him. And now he's, been trying to hide his money ever since. And the courts are hounding him and not letting him declare bankruptcy. And that's what Trump would have to look forward to. So this decision is huge if the Supreme Court says yes. It's huge because it affects all presidents going forward, and it would almost certainly bankrupt Donald Trump.
Yeah, I share your, if you want to call it, pessimism about this. I don't think this is as seismic as CNN or other cable outlets are trying to make it seem. They have, for years, we've seen it time and time again, fallen into this like, oh, we finally got him, the walls are closing in type narrative. And I think part of this sensationalism is just a ratings play. You have to try to drum up otherwise pretty boring court proceedings as something much more important than they are to captivate viewers. I just don't see it happening. Like every time I'm on here, it seems, and we talk about Trump, I offer the same analysis, which is I'll believe it when I see it. Because this is somebody who has exploited what we have as a 2-tiered justice system, never faces repercussions for his actions, although he should. I'm in the camp that he absolutely should. I just don't see it happening. And like you're saying, Cenk, this court, that 3 of the justices he appointed, I don't have a lot of faith that they would side with this court or this ruling. I think they would protect him in part because of partisanship and just as a quiet thank you for their role, but also just they're willing to bend the law however they see fit if it helps people on the right.
I like that you mentioned that you sort of have to drum up the excitement around this to play it to the audience for these cable news networks, because I was actually going to make a joke that I'm particularly interested in this because I'm a huge freaking nerd about this specific legal doctrine. And I guess, my sort of analysis of this, maybe I'm divorcing it too much from Trump himself and viewing it, more in a vacuum of a president, any president, not him necessarily. And, I see more. Of course, you can't do that when you're considering the appeal and the influence that he has over the justices that he appointed, the influence and the bias that they carry with them. I mean, the reasons why they were appointed. But I don't know. I'm just overly optimistic, and I've been burned so many times before after I've made statements on this show about my optimism for the court that maybe I just need to let that part of me die.
But hey, look, we're all rooting for you, right? We hope you're right, but we'll see.
Thanks for watching the video, guys. We also love it if you hit the join button below, because that makes you a member, and members allow us to be independent, honest. We can be as progressive as we want, no corporate media influence, and that's all because of you guys. We love doing the show with our members. Hit the join button, become one of the Young Turks.